Hi, it's John Dillon. I'm making this video from my study at our summer home in Cashiers, North Carolina. So why would an 80-year-old man decide to embark on a cross-country road trip? I hasten to add I'm not 80 yet, although by the time I return, I'll be within 6 weeks of it, so I suppose that's within a reasonable rounding error. I decided after my wife Ann announced that she was having a few girlfriends from our winter home in Vero Beach, Florida, visit us in North Carolina for 4 or 5 days. And so she suggested to me it would be a good time to go on a guy's golf trip or find a project that would keep me occupied. So I have a reasonably new Tesla, and I've watched a few road trip videos as I tried to understand the basics of charging on the road. I drove to Vero Beach last fall, and then I returned from Florida in June. So that relieved me of a lot of the range anxiety associated with buying an electric car. The trips actually reminded me a little bit of a road rally, where the goal was to find convenient and efficient superchargers to refill the batteries, and I found it actually to be rather fun. So I got to thinking, I've driven across the country twice, each time more than 55 years ago. My first was when I rode with two Georgia Tech fraternity brothers, John Walker and Edwin Phillips, from Atlanta to San Francisco. They were going to Stanford Business School, and I was a brand new second lieutenant commissioned from ROTC, and I was on my way to Travis Air Force Base for transport to Korea, which was my duty assignment. We were in our early 20s with little travel experience, and in my case, I'd never really traveled much outside of Georgia. So it was a big adventure for us, and I still have strong memories of that trip and the places we went and the sights we saw. So I thought it'd be great to sort of recreate a little bit of that feeling again. My parents used to subscribe to National Geographic magazine, and as a little kid I would read that occasionally. Those were expensive magazines with beautiful pictures, and I remember my parents would keep the old issues, so we had literally cupboards full of National Geographic magazines. And so I actually got pretty good at geography when I was a little kid, and I guess I've carried that interest ever since. I also remember my grandfather giving me a book by Richard Halliburton when I was about 11 years old. Halliburton was a photojournalist from Memphis, and as a very young man, he traveled all over the world to very adventuresome places, and he made a very good living writing books and giving speeches. Sometime in my 20s, I read a book by John Steinbeck entitled Travels with Charlie, and that has stuck with me for a long time. As you probably know, John Steinbeck grew up in Salinas, California, in the Monterey Bay area, very poor, but became one of America's best-selling novelists, primarily fiction, with titles such as Grapes of Wrath. So he became quite rich and famous and actually spent about half his life in New York City. But in 1960, he decided that he wanted to reestablish roots with what he called America. He felt he had lost touch with the United States as a result of a sheltered life in New York. And so along with his dog Charlie, across America, he bought a camper van, which he titled Rocinante, which was the name of Don Quixote's horse. And they set out to journey across the country, and the book is a compilation of those travels. Ann and I have been fortunate enough to travel to a great many places over the last 25 plus years. And one of the things we've done is, I think, maybe somewhat unique. We came up with the idea of buying a coffee mug in various places to remind us of a trip. For example, this is one from Berlin at Checkpoint Charlie. This is one that we bought in Bergen, Norway before we started on a cruise. This is one from Alaska, Annapolis, Maryland. Newport, Rhode Island. Ireland, I always like that because I'm Irish. The bridge climb in Sydney. To tell you the truth, I wimped out on that one because I've got a little bit of fear of heights, but Ann did it. She was a real trooper. London. Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. Here's one from a trip that we took to Tokyo and Kyoto and a few other cities in Japan. This is Mount Hood in Oregon. Buenos Aires. That was a part of a fabulous trip that we made to Antarctica, and we started by flying into Buenos Aires. Vienna. New Zealand. Goodness, we got some in the back I haven't used in a while. Kennebunkport, Maine. Another Irish mug. I've been there several times, particularly with golf. This is a trip we took to Canada with some friends from Atlanta. This has got to be, oh, this is the San Diego Zoo. This one faded. This is Italy. I think it may be Venice. Israel. Holland, or the Netherlands. Portugal. This is Sintra. This is a cruise that we took on the River Cloud. I think this was a Kalos trip. What a beautiful place that is. Maybe the prettiest place in the United States. This is from the Loire Valley in France. And lastly, Vietnam, part of a trip we took to South Asia. So that's our collection. We keep all of these in our home in North Carolina. But it's kind of fun. So when we make a cup of coffee, we just pick a mug, and it reminds us of our trip. And as you can tell, there's no particular artistic value in this. In fact, we sort of like the tacky ones because they stand out a little better. So that's a bit of a long-winded explanation on why I want to do this. And I've gotten quite excited about it, and it's given me something to plan and look ahead to. So I thought I would share with you my preliminary thoughts on my routing. So I went to Google Maps and dropped a pin on all the places that I think would be interesting to visit. And this would serve as the starter for developing a preliminary route. I also decided early on, even though there are a lot of golf courses that I'm going to pass nearby, such as Sand Hills in Nebraska, many courses in Colorado, that I would like to play. It takes most of a day to play a golf course, so that would simply make the trip too long. So I've decided to leave my golf clubs at home. So this is what I've come up with. I plan to start in Cashiers, North Carolina, which is our summer home for many years. Drive from there to Nashville, where I'd like to take in a country music performance, maybe at the Ryman Auditorium, which is one of my favorite venues. From there to Branson, Missouri, where I understand there are a lot of attractions and things to see and do. Drive to Oklahoma City, get a little flavor for that town and for Oklahoma. From there, go to Amarillo. I had a friend recommend the Big Texas Steak Ranch restaurant, where they have a 72-ounce steak challenge. If you eat it, you get it for free. And he says it's worth the trip. So I've got that on the route. Also, the Cadillac Ranch, which intrigues me for some reason. It's simply a bunch of Cadillacs that are apparently buried in the ground, sort of a scrapyard Stonehenge, I suppose. Don't know why that interests me, but it does. From there to Tucumcari, and then to Albuquerque, where I want to visit the National Museum of Nuclear Science and learn about the Manhattan Project, Robert Oppenheimer and that crowd. Up to Santa Fe, which Anne wants to see, and I think she's going to join me there, which will be great. And maybe drive up to Tahoe, which she's been to and would like to see again. And I haven't visited that before, so that'll be fun. And then we would go over to past the Petrified Forest, stop in Winslow, Arizona, which is the old Route 66, which is the home of the famous Eagle song. And apparently that's worth a stop. And then to Sedona, which I understand is a beautiful city with much to do around there. And then up to the Grand Canyon for maybe our last visit there. We'd like to see it again. And from there, Ann has decided that's enough driving for her, and she's probably going to fly home from there. And I would continue on to the Rainbow Bridge National Monument, the Mesa Verde National Park, which is the old Indian cliff dwelling site, up to the Gunnison National Park, stop in Aspen, which I think is a charming town in the summer, up to the Eagle Springs area, and then over to Colorado Springs, where I want to see the Air Force Academy, Pikes Peak, and Garden of the Gods. I think is supposed to be very pretty there. Then on up from Colorado Springs to the Grand Tetons, Yellowstone National Park area. Then drive over to perhaps the Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument, although that may be a little bit of a long detour for a relatively short amount of attraction time. Then to the Devil's Tower National Monument, which you may remember was featured in E.T. I think that would be worth seeing. And then into South Dakota, where I really want to go, because I've been to 49 states, but I've never been to South Dakota for some reason. I've been to North Dakota, and this will punch my ticket for all 50 states. So I want to see Mount Rushmore and the Crazy Horse Museum, and then down past the Sand Hills Golf Club. Maybe I'll just have lunch there. I hear it's a wonderful spot. Stop in North Platte, Nebraska, at the Golden Spike Tower, which I think is the home of the world's largest railroad yards. And since, like most people, I like trains, I thought that would be interesting. Then on to the Eisenhower Library in Abilene, Kansas, the Truman Library in Independence, Missouri, and then home, possibly with a stop at Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, and back to North Carolina. So that's my preliminary idea. I'm sure I'll be changing this a little bit. But I think I'm going to enjoy it. It's been fun planning it so far. Now for some bonus footage for my kids and grandkids about my first cross-country trip with my two fraternity brothers. So the three of us set out from Atlanta to drive cross-country to San Francisco. We were riding in Edwin's Ford, which was pulling John's Volkswagen convertible, which, as you can see, was filled with almost everything the three of us owned. We didn't have much money, so we didn't stop very often and alternated the driving for most of the day and night. Although we did stop in Dallas, I remember, to see another fraternity brother in Dallas. We stopped at Vicksburg, I believe, when we reached the Mississippi River. That's Edwin peering down the cannon barrel and John in the rear. I remember at Sweetwater, Texas, the bumper on John's car gave way, which caused us to lose control, and we were very lucky to avoid a serious crash. As you can see, it was raining cats and dogs, but we found this wonderful Texas small garage shop that would repair the damage and send us on our way. Here I am looking at the first oil well I had ever seen. Me on the left and Edwin looking at the petrified forest, followed by a stop at the painted desert. Most people, including me, probably have a hard time recognizing this as a 21-year-old John Dillon. This is Edwin taking in the Hoover Dam and Lake Mead, and then on to San Francisco, where I went to Travis Air Force Base and they went to Stanford.